What's up? My name's Chris, and today I'm talking about the xshot longshot. It's this blaster that is incredibly fun to use, but it has this design flaw where it keeps shattering its plunger tube. And here's the thing, I wouldn't be going through and making this video if I didn't think it was worth your time to take it apart and fix the problem. So in this video, I'm going to be taking apart the blaster and showing how you can modify it. You know, all you need is a screwdriver, and I use my pocket knife to kind of carve a little channel for the spring to kind of sit in so it doesn't fall out. But yeah, like I said, it's worth it. This blaster is incredibly fun. Another thing I want to say is this thing only came out probably like a month ago, maybe 2 months ago, something like that. So it's entirely possible that xshot is going to fix the problem and that they will release a version of this blaster that doesn't have this problem and you won't have to fix it. But at least this early version, it definitely has the problem. It's just so much fun. And the thing that doesn't come across on video is slam firing on this thing is just like, there's no tactical reason why you would need to slam fire, but it's so much fun. It's like incredibly fun. So yeah, it's worth fixing it if you can. Mine actually broke the plunger tube. I knew about the broken plunger tube problem, and I had to order it online. So it came without any broken plunger tube, and then it broke. So I think that if you bought this blaster, or if you're thinking about buying this blaster, you should. But if you bought it and it didn't break the plunger tube yet, it's probably going to break it. So I'll show you what the problem is. When you prime the blaster, you can see you can kind of see in the window there that the plunger moves forward. They've got this spring in there, and if you kind of bang the blaster around or shake it when it's in its primed state, you're going to see that spring fall off its mounting hole and just be loose inside the plunger tube. And another thing you can do, it's not doing it on mine because I fixed it, but you've probably seen that happen if you've owned this blaster for a little while. Another thing you can do if you plug up the end of the barrel and then fire it, just the vibration of the mainspring deploying is like enough vibration to knock that spring down. So basically every time you fire the blaster, that spring is falling off of its mounting point and it's just loose inside the plunger tube. Anyway, this is just my theory because I only have one blaster, but I've seen a ton of broken plunger tubes online. I think that's what's happening, is that once that spring is loose inside the plunger tube, the plunger comes flying back at full speed, crashes into the spring. The spring is supposed to cushion the blow of the plunger tube, but if the spring isn't aligned, if it's not mounted properly, then that plunger is going to like crush the spring up and just snaps back onto the mounting place. And I think that's when it's smacking the plunger tube, because my plunger tube cracked right here, kind of close to the spring. And like every time I've seen a broken plunger tube, that's kind of where it's happened. And you can kind of see this is still a broken plunger tube. If I kind of rotate it here, you can see that there's a crack. Because the plunger tube is just a pipe, you can actually take that plunger tube and reverse it. You can just totally reverse the direction on it. And so, you know, in my case, the crack was kind of small, but it is actually getting longer. So eventually I probably will have to replace this plunger tube, but at least it's not going to break another plunger tube. So, all right, so let me go ahead and get oriented here so you can watch me disassemble this blaster. And as I said, all you really need is a screwdriver and some kind of a pocket knife to make the change. You know, I really like that they use the same size screw for just about every screw in the blaster. Not every company does that. And think that's kind of annoying, and they use different size screws. The only screws that you have to be careful about here are the 3 screws at the front of the blaster that you can use to take out the spring and disassemble it. So those 3 screws are just a little bit shorter, but pretty much every other screw in the blaster is all the same length, so you don't have to worry about, you know, getting them kind of confused. You probably should make a pile of screws, but I pretty much never do. So I'm starting with the buttstock there, because you kind of have to take that off first so that you can get to the other screws that are back here. You know, it's kind of upsetting that this blaster has this design flaw, because Zuru has already kind of taken a risk at making a bullpup style blaster. That's kind of an uncommon way to design a blaster in the bullpup configuration. But, you know, they took a risk and designed this blaster in a weird configuration. And now they're going to be punished for it, because all those people who are returning this blaster to Target, I mean, what is Target going to do to this blaster? They're going to throw it in the trash probably, or try to sell it to the next person who isn't paying attention. And that's sad, because the blaster is way more fun than you probably would assume it would be. I was considering editing this video, but then I realized it's YouTube, and YouTube audience, you're probably not worth the effort of editing a video. So, if you're bored, just skip forward to the end. Yeah, you know, back in the day when I used to modify Nerf blasters, I had this dream, right, that I wanted to get the Nerf Centurion, which is the mega sniper rifle. I wanted to get that Centurion blaster and then modify it to shoot short darts. And I thought, you know what, with that big plunger tube in the Centurion, that thing would be like a laser pointer with the darts. And then a buddy of mine bought a Centurion, and I had the opportunity to shoot it. And it's so ridiculously long, because the Centurion is not a bullpup configuration where the receiver is behind the trigger. The Centurion is a standard style blaster, so like the receiver is way out here, and then the barrel extends even farther than that. So it was just incredibly weird to shoot it, because it's way too long, and I was like, you know what, I'm not going to do this modification. Now, there are other reasons why that's a bad idea, because the Centurion, it has this like sliding plunger tube thing that it's really hard to modify, and so pretty much nobody does it. Another thing about this blaster you might notice, I've got the sights, the iron sights, I've got them configured so that they're as far apart as you could possibly get them. Like with iron sights, you want as much distance between the 2 sights if you want better accuracy. So I've had flipped them around in such a way that it makes more sense. And the other thing I'll say, right, so you got this hole here that allows you to put something through it to kind of lock it onto the Picatinny rail. So when my plunger tube broke, I was the most angry, because I had put a zip tie through each of those holes to keep the sights kind of locked onto the blaster, and I had to cut those zip ties. So at some point I'll probably put the zip ties back on, but I can already see that the crack in the plunger tube is spreading. So anyway, we'll have to see what happens. Alright, so these 2 front screws that I'm unscrewing now, they are shorter than the rest of the screws in the blaster, so you have to be careful with these. So just to kind of illustrate, this is the standard length, and this is the short one. So There you go. You see they're just a tiny bit shorter, but there are 3 of these size at the front of the blaster. So you have to be careful with those. I'm going to put them over on this side so that I don't lose them. And then these plastic pegs actually fall out of the other side. So you want to keep a hold of those. And they have a little foot on the back. So those go to the side. Once you've done that, you can actually pull this little plastic piece out of the front. And this is that thing that you can see. You can actually pull the barrel out of the front of the blaster if you needed to do a quick barrel change. The other thing that we'll do, I might not need to take off this screw. I'm going to see if I can take it apart without removing that screw. But alright, I think I've pretty much taken out all the screws that need to be taken out. So let me shake them out a little bit and see if I can pull the thing apart. See if I've missed any. Alright, I got a few that won't let go, so I have to just give them a little spin. That's the thing. This screwdriver is not magnetic, so it doesn't pull the screws out, which is kind of a pain. All right. All right. Let's see. I got them all. All right. There you go. Yeah, it's probably better if you can actually pull the screws out with a magnetic screwdriver. But yeah, I don't have one of those. All right, screws everywhere. Now the nice thing is there aren't any springs that came flying out, so I'm probably coming out ahead. So let me make a pile of screws here, get organized. All right. So one thing as well that I'll probably do before I reassemble, this thing here, this little arm, does have a little spring at the top, so you kind of have to be careful. This arm is the thing that kind of ratchets with these little bumps here, but it's also the thing that keeps the blaster in a forward position after you've primed it. So I tried running the blaster without this. I tried taking it out, and it really is kind of a pain, because when you go to pull this trigger, which is going to deep prime the main spring here, you pull the trigger, it actually, if you don't have this lever up here, it just pulls the blaster forward. And I mean, it pulls the priming handle forward, and it doesn't actually release the spring. So you kind of have to keep your hand on it if you wanted to do that. So I had to leave this thing in here. But I might remove this little piece right here. If you remove this piece, this little spike, then you should be able to prime it without these ratcheting pieces catching, which is, I don't like the ratcheting function of it. It feels kind of weird, so I might do that, but I don't know. All right. So let's pull this plunger tube off. I think what I need to do, actually, let me take apart, I do need to take this screw out of here. I probably should have done that from outside the blaster. But that screw, again, is a short screw. So that one goes over here with those other 3. And there you go, the priming handle comes off. You take the plunger tube out. The barrel comes out. And then we can kind of look at this piece here. So, alright, so here's my shattered plunger tube. I'll kind of give you an overview of how that broke. Yeah, that's pretty bad. It's actually getting worse. I didn't realize that the crack was actually getting longer. But you can kind of see how it originally broke. We had this kind of shatter here that just kind of moved out in a few different directions, but it wasn't very long. And on the other side, it looks like I have a very long crack that started. So that's kind of a problem. I will probably have to buy a new plunger tube. But here's the kind of the source of the problem. This spring is supposed to be sitting on this little mounting piece here, and it's on these pieces. If you, I don't know if you can kind of see that here. There are these parts that kind of pop out a little bit. Yeah, there you go. You can kind of see it there. There's just a little, it's like a widening. There's 4 of them where they kind of pop out. And those are supposed to kind of hold on to the spring, but they don't really have any kind of latching mechanism to them. They're just kind of like, it's just expanding a little bit. So what I did is I took my pocket knife and just carved a little bit of plastic out of these. So yeah, all I did was take this, and you can almost see it here actually. If we look, you can kind of see how there's a little notch like at the bottom now. Right there. It's so hard to see. Let me point it towards the window. God, it's really hard to see this. Yeah, there's a little notch at the bottom of that thing. If I rotate it around, there's a little notch right at the bottom of that one as well. So all I did was I came in here with the knife and just like carved it away. God, it keeps not focusing, so you can't really see. But yeah, I did that on all 4 of them. You can see that little notch maybe at the base, right about there. Right about there, it gets a little bit narrower. And I did that so the spring would have like a place to kind of rest. Because if you don't do that, then the spring is just sliding up and down. And this thing is covered in lube from being inside of the plunger tube. So anyway, that's all I did. When you put the dry fire protection spring back on, I mean, it's not a super positive grip. Like, it still wiggles around a little bit, but it's not just sliding off. And the thing is, if there's any kind of vibrations or anything, it's not just going to pop off. So it's kind of on there, and it's way better than it used to be. So that's the modification. That's going to keep that spring in place. And then hopefully it doesn't shatter your plunger tube. Now again, when mine shattered, it was like this. So it broke right here where the spring, my theory is that if the spring is loose inside of there, and it's just oriented however which way it is, when that plunger tube flies back, it's slamming it back onto its mounting place like that, and it's probably smacking into the side of the plunger tube and cracking it. So that's my theory anyway. But yeah, it lost all of its power when it was mounted like this. And then what I did is I took it apart and flipped the plunger tube around like this and put it back together. And I mean, it's been working fine. But this crack is actually getting pretty close. I can see that this is going to continue to get worse over time. So that's a pain for me. If you buy this blaster new, then I would suggest doing this modification before you fire it, even once, because I'm pretty sure that this thing's going to break any plunger tube if that spring comes loose. So I don't know. Who knows? Maybe in the future, xshot will release a version of this blaster that holds onto the spring a little bit better. I don't really know, but you can at least fix it now and have some fun with fun with it. So, all right, that's it. See you later. Bye.